Can a male novelist legitimately write as a female narrator? Is it okay for a white person to write a television show about black youth? Who is entitled to do yoga? Questions about cultural appropriation often crop up around Halloween, but from the arts to fashion to music, it's a live issue year-round. Joining us now to explore the complexities of when it is or isn't okay to adopt elements from other cultures, in North Vancouver, British Columbia, via Skype, Shane Jackson. He's the president of Spirit Works Limited. In Washington, D.C., Andrew Cohen, Fulbright Fellow at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. And here in studio, Sadaf Hassan, web editor at the National Post, Ruxana Khan, children's and young adult author and storyteller, and Diana Fitzgerald-Bryden, poet and novelist. And we are happy to welcome everybody, both here and in Points Beyond, to our conversation today. Sadaf, you're going to get us started by telling us what cultural appropriation is.
So cultural appropriation, a lot of people can define it in different ways, but generally what it means is when a dominant, privileged culture borrows from another culture, and that could be in music, art, fashion, food, language, what have you, and they take it over and they kind of make it a little bit their own by taking it out of context, and sometimes that means they get praised for a part of that minority culture that the minority culture gets put down for.
Give us an example of maybe the most egregious instance that you found along the way.
I think one thing that's been really popular lately is, and this is a hairstyle that's commonly associated with the black culture, dreadlocks. We've seen this a lot, from Justin Bieber to models on the runway. This is a hairstyle that's commonly associated with black women or men, and they've worn it for years, and it goes back in time. But whenever you have a white model wearing it or a white actor or celebrity, it takes away from that culture and it makes it seem like it's theirs. They're praised for finding this new fashionable style, whereas those women who originally wore it are put down as being unprofessional or unclean.
Andrew, do you find this problematic?
I certainly do, and I just don't understand the argument. I think that if we deal with each other with civility and respect, there is no reason that other people cannot borrow or use with attribution those symbols and elements from other cultures, particularly in the realm of fiction, which we've discussed. Novelists have been attacked for using other elements of culture. It's about creativity, and cultural appropriation, I think, is a misnomer. In many ways, it's the ultimate form of flattery, imitation, and as long as it's done with respect, I frankly don't see the issue.
Shane, how about you?
I believe Andrew is probably trying to play the devil's advocate a little bit, because I couldn't see how anybody could think anything of the sort. I come from two cultures. I come from a culture that was very oppressed by dominant culture, which also I share, which is a British culture. So, yeah, from my perspective, it really is. It's all about empathy, and it's about respect, and I'm sure I'll say a little bit more about it as we go along here.
Ruxana, you gave kind of a big exhale when Andrew finished his answer. What was that all about?
Well, because the problem is they're profiting from it. Like they're gaining notoriety, but at the same time, I think that us marginalized cultures, we have to really pick and choose our battles. If we're going to fight about cultural appropriation, about people copying us, when there's really big injustices happening, like really big ones, like Black Lives Matter, you look at the reservation situation with treaties not being honored, that's more important. That's where we should be focusing our efforts more.
So as the expression goes, this is not the hill you want to die on, so to speak.
Yeah, you got to pick your battles, right? Like why you can't control what other people are going to wear and what they're going to do. You just can't. And our society is based on freedom of expression. And yeah, there's going to be people out there that are going to be jerks about it.
Diana, I like this question because nobody is going to know the answer when they look at you.
Okay.
Okay, there's a close-up of Diana. What's your ethnic background?
Okay. Well, let's see.
With the name Diana Fitzgerald-Bryden,
Yes.
What's your background?
Well, I'm partly Jewish on my mother's side, and my father's side, actually. My father is also Trinidadian, a white West Indian. So that's my ethnic background.
So with all of that, that fabulously Canadian background in the mix, where do you come from on this issue?
On the issue of cultural appropriation?
Yes.
I think it's more complex than Andrew was saying. I think that, I think as a writer, and actually as a human being, the main tool that I have to know other people, to be interested in them, is my imagination. And I think we owe each other the projection of our imagination to understand each other. I think that's part of our job in the world. I believe as a writer that means sometimes I will be putting myself in someone else's shoes.
Well, let's give an example of that. You've got a novel out right now in which I guess one of the protagonists is a Lebanese person.
Yeah.
You're not Lebanese.
I'm definitely not Lebanese, and that you can definitely tell by looking at me.
Are you are you catching any flack for that?
I did. The book came out quite a few years ago, but not as much flack as I would have imagined. It should be said that there are several protagonists in my book, and one of them is a young, white, English-born Canadian woman of Jewish heritage, who would obviously be closely modeled on me. Some of the other characters are friends of hers and actually enemies of hers who she meets, and one is a lover who are Lebanese, who she meets actually. They're in exile. They're living in Athens. So I didn't catch as much flack as I would have thought, to be honest.
And therefore, were you encouraged by that?
I guess I was encouraged by that, yeah. I think I tried to do a serious job. I tried to tell a story that interested me. I tried to learn something about the people I was writing about, because as a writer, I tend to write to learn as much as I write to tell a story. And a friend actually mentioned something to me today. She said, people often assume when you're writing about yourself that you know yourself. But do you know yourself?
Well, that's part of what writing does for you, right?
Yeah, it is part of
that journey of exploration.
Maybe that's why you look at other people as well.
Okay. So. Andrew, I want to follow up on something you said in your first response, which was you were okay with it as long as respect is paid and acknowledgement of the contribution of the other cultures is there. Can you give me an example of how a cultural appropriation moment would take place and how the person doing so would acknowledge and or pay respect to the culture that was being appropriated?
I'm not sure how you would easily do it. I can tell you what would offend me. Like Diana, I'm Jewish, and I would be offended. I was offended, for example, when Prince Harry, if it was Prince Harry, I believe it was, showed up at a party several years ago wearing the garb of an SS uniform. That was offensive because with it came with all of those images of the worst kind of inhumanity. However, as a Jew, if somebody in a cultural, in a certain use, had somebody in a tallis and a yarmulke, which are symbols of the Jewish faith, and was done that way, I would not be offended by that. I think what has to guide us is, as Shane has said, a certain empathy and respect without shutting down creativity. And I think that's an issue. And, Diana was saying, well, I've tried to do something outside my experience, partly Jewish as she is. I would say to her that my reading of this debate is critics would say you can't do it because you simply don't have the feelings, the elements, the properties of that type of soul. So I'm not so sure when she says it's more complex that it is. I think there are some who simply say you cannot try anything and there's no creative license here. And that's the danger. So I suppose we have to be guided by certain elements of as I say, empathy and respect, but it's a minefield.
Well, let me
it's
follow
very
up.
Dangerous to walk in.
Let me follow up with Shane on that minefield. Shane, I want to get a better understanding whether or not it's possible for, say, a non-Indigenous person to write a book where the protagonist is Indigenous, where the antagonist may be Indigenous. It's not their culture, it's your culture, but they want to write about it. What's your view on that?
You know what? I do respect a lot of Andrew's points of views, but I don't agree with hiding behind sort of the realm of freedom of speech or freedom of expression or creativity. I come from a culture. If you look behind me, you'll see this is Coast Salish artwork. I come from a Coast Salish community, and within this artwork, it looks very aesthetically pleasing. I hope to you, a lot of it's mine, but there's some very sophisticated symbolism and meaning within this artwork that was all but destroyed by a legal system that actually outlawed it and outlawed a lot of my culture. This is just being clawed back right now. And at the very same time that this is being clawed back and this meaning is being brought back to my people, people are imitating this and attempting to commodify it and bastardize it and skew the meaning. And to me, this occurs not just in artwork. This occurs in our culture. This definitely occurs in writing. And when it comes to fiction, I'm going to throw this out there right now, and I'm sure it'll ruffle a few feathers, but there's a difference between fiction and nonsense. I think you're I think if you're a writer and you're trying to write from the perspective of somebody else, and you don't do the research and you don't understand this culture, you're being lazy. Just like I read a lot, I'm sorry for taking so much time here. I read a lot of historical fiction. If the writer who's writing the historical fiction can't even keep the dates right, that's when you drive from the realm of fiction into nonsense.
All right, but Shane, then what you're saying is I think you've opened the door to an author who may not be from your background, but as long as they honor the work and do the research and know whereof they speak, you're okay with that. Is that right?
I am, and to be quite honest, I come from two cultures. I'm not a blood quantum person. But if somebody understands my culture, and if we have those who are adopted into our culture that truly understand it, fill your boots.
Okay, that's a good expression. I haven't heard that one before. Let's do this here. I'm going to put this, where are we here? Okay, are we going to board 2 next? Is that right? Okay, Lionel Shriver, or is it pronounced Lionel? How does she say her name?
I think it's Lionel.
Lionel? Okay.
Yeah.
Lionel Shriver, known for her book, We Need to Talk About Kevin, caused a controversy when she spoke at the Brisbane Writers' Festival and said the following: I am hopeful that the concept of, quote, cultural appropriation is a passing fad. People with different backgrounds rubbing up against each other and exchanging ideas and practices is self-evidently one of the most productive, fascinating aspects of modern urban life. Okay, Sadaf, what do you think?
Wow. I mean, you're reducing an entire issue down to a fad, a trend. This isn't skinny jeans. It's not wearing a choker. This means so much more to so many people. And I think when you do that, you just take away from it and from what it means to all of those people and to those minority cultures. It's just taking away the value, and that's really difficult to hear. It means so much more. And I think what she's done there is really just make it something that's easy for her to understand and easy for her to sell that way, because it doesn't sound like an issue that way, but it means so much more.
How about
And
you,
it's their
Roseanne?
livelihood. It's like how do ethnic authors, we come from a certain culture, and we're trying to tell our stories in our way, and we're at a bit of a disadvantage, because when you're coming from that culture and you're trying to couch the story in terms that mainstream audiences have access to, because let's face it, the mainstream audiences are the ones who have the money. Our own cultural people not necessarily going to buy our books, but the mainstream audiences we hope will. And the thing is, a person coming from mainstream audience writing about a certain culture, they're going to pick the hot topic buttons, like female genital mutilation or something like that that people know about and they care about. And they're going to write some sensationalistic novel that white people can pick up. I'm not talking about all white people. I'm just talking about, just for brevity. But white people can pick up, and they actually read about this culture in terms that they're familiar with. Oh my goodness! And it actually reinforces their own feeling of cultural superiority. I mean, these are the kind of novels that are being written by often by white people, not all of them, but by white authors who are profiting off of the other cultures, basically kind of airing their dirty laundry, writing something sensationalistic. And the readers are the ones who are reading it and thinking, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I don't live there. I'm so glad I come from my culture and we're so civilized, look at them.
Andrew, is this a legitimate consequence in your view?
No, it's not. I simply don't understand how we can tell novelists, writers of fiction, what to write. Are we going to have some form of artistic police telling writers that they can't write? Are we going to have tests by which they submit their work and we see how appropriate or inappropriate it is? Readers decide that. The market decides that. People who will find it distasteful ought not to read it. People who find it inaccurate, although it's fiction, to speak to Shane's point, ought not to read it. The market will tell those novelists they're not very good. But to say that we can measure or police or restrict what novelists, and this was Lionel Shriver's argument, which is why I found the reaction, frankly, incredulous. This is what she's saying. And to go into that realm is a restriction of freedom of speech. This is fiction. It is fiction.
Diana.
Okay, I agree with you in part, Andrew, but I think Lionel Shriver was using a red-hot poker. She wanted to make people jump. And I think part of the problem is if you read the text of her whole lecture, there are some very good points there, and it's actually quite well thought out. And she talks about a writer having to have compassion and use compassion and empathy and insight to write somebody else. But she used the most crude possible metaphors and the most crude examples to make her point. And it's not the same thing to wear a sombrero as it is to do what a writer does, which is serious hard work, using their imagination to get inside the mind of someone who is not them, which is something that we do from the moment that we start to read. I mean, that's what books give you, right? That you can learn something or be inside another person other than yourself.
But I guess as people watch this setup, I think they want to know what's the harm here.
Yeah.
If the cultural appropriation is allowed to happen, what is the actual harm involved?
I mean, I think if we're specifically talking about fiction, especially with Lionel Shriver, if you're looking at a white writer taking this story, it's going through it's being filtered through their perspective and their biases, because this is not an experience they've lived. It's not really one they can understand. So that's why it's a little bit different, even when you're talking about between minority and minority, because this is something that we understand and we've lived through it. So when you have a white writer who takes that over and takes that experience, it really takes the nuance away. And
Well, what's the harm?
Well, I think you're looking at a culture misrepresented to a wider platform of people. Lionel Shriver is a best-selling author. She's an award winner. I've read her, I've loved her work, but she has this huge audience that she speaks to, and this is what they're seeing, and this is what they're hearing, and then you think, that's the right perspective, that's what I should be looking at, but it's not, and that is so harmful.
And if you think of that the
But why
market's
would you
gonna
not
direct
give
it-
that? Why would we not give that audience a certain credit for being able to determine
Well,
the
because the audience could
veracity
be
or the
ignorant.
credibility of her argument?
But then we're assuming that the audience is going to go and look up everything that they're
Yeah.
reading. And again, we're talking
Why
about
wouldn't they?
fiction.
Why wouldn't they?
So I
That's their
don't think
responsibility as readers.
Well, we're not talking about nonfiction here, and I think that's where the lines blur a little bit, and that's where I think it gets really tricky. I think readers don't always take the initiative to go look up what they're reading.
No, they're not going to.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
going to assume, especially if they respect an author, they're going to assume they know what they're talking about.
Exactly.
And that author, being a best-selling author, has a bigger megaphone, to speak. And the ones who are objecting about it, they kind of get pushed to the side. And even if they're from the culture, and they're just like sour grapes and stuff, and people would rather hear what Lionel Shriver is saying, because that jives with what they want to believe, that yes, you can put yourself in minority positions and understand completely what their reality is. And that's not really the case.
Exactly.
Even with me, I was writing about Afghan culture. I have a sister-in-law who's from Kabul. I have a son-in-law who's from Kandahar. I was writing about Afghan culture, and I got things wrong. I mean, that's like a sister. I'm Pakistani. They're Afghan. I thought I didn't think it would be an issue.
But didn't
when
people let you know you got things wrong?
well, that was when I actually asked the people that were vetting the manuscript,
Okay.
and I asked them to be perfectly honest. And the thing is, I have confronted some authors who were white and who were writing about indigenous cultures, like Pakistani culture, and they said, "Oh yeah, I asked some people, but if you don't ask other authors who understand exactly what you need a no-holds-barred approach about yes, this is wrong, this is wrong." Sometimes they'll be so intimidated, especially if you're white and they're colonized people. They'll be so intimidated that they'll just say, "Oh yeah, it's okay," but then behind your back they'll say, "Oh my gosh, that was full of shit." I'm sorry.
You're allowed to say that here.
Yeah.
Shane, let me get you in here on this angle of harm, and talk to us, if you would, about the potential economic harm that may be, involved here.
A couple points, and I really enjoy Roxana's view of this. But getting back to Andrew's free market approach, I mean, that scares me because obviously in any democracy, that's how we gauge it on how we treat our minorities. But even in the Shriver article herself, she literally said, we should try and research things, but she's guilty as well as, and I think her exact words were, we're just trying to get away with this. We're trying to put one over. What can we put one over or put over on our audience? Well, again, that goes back into the realm of nonsense again. But getting back to the economic stuff that you asked about, I mean, from our perspective, and and I'm an artist, and so obviously I try and make a living through artwork. When you attempt to commodify our artwork, and again, this goes into fashion, this goes into writing, this goes in everything, you're attempting to divert resources away from very, very vulnerable people, and that brings in, and maybe I'll even focus this on Andrew. When you do this, because I come from two cultures, so I'm sort of almost the colonized and the colonizer, as well as the oppressor and the oppressed. In a sort of schizophrenic way, part of me feels very, very guilty about the other side, and I try my best personally to try and be alive to that responsibility to try and for my own dignity, to try and not tread too heavily economically or culturally on other cultures.
Andrew,
How do you feel about that?
And yeah, Andrew, you want to come back on that?
I certainly respect, and I can't say understand, but I certainly respect where Shane is coming from on that question. My worry is that we tell people what they can paint. We tell people what they can write. We tell people the food they can eat. We tell people the clothes they can wear. I understand and repeat the measure of respect and empathy, but at a certain point, I don't understand how you regulate this, how you tell an author he or she can't write, how you tell a painter he or she can't paint. It seems to be if that author is writing something that is unacceptable, or if the painter is painting something which is ugly, people won't read it, or they won't buy it, or they won't look at it. And that to me should be...
They let you know.
Or they'll let you know, and they should let you know, and they will let you know by not reading your work. So if Lionel Shriver is writing in a way that is antagonistic or disrespectful to people, she'll be told that, presumably.
Let me follow up with Sadaf on that. Would you agree with Andrew that the world has a way of working these things out?
I don't know about that. I mean, we're looking at, this is a very specific issue, and I think we're aware of it because we read these things, but I think the majority of people, the majority of her readers don't, and they're not going to see this. And I think what's also really significant here is that she has this huge platform, and she's taking it away, by writing about these cultures, she's taking it away from writers who are of that culture and could be writing about it, and it's their story. So we're also taking that away from them. So I don't think it quite works that way, and it's not that simple. Just having a few people tell her something is the same thing as those writers saying, you're talking about my story and you're taking it from me. Who's hearing them?
Andrew asked you, how is that being taken away?
I think it's the same way we've been discussing. Once you start talking about somebody else's story that they've lived with and you filter it through your own bias that you've never lived through, and it's not an experience that you know, and you take it over, it becomes your story. At least for me as a reader, that's how I sense it. And I think when you take that away from that person who's actually lived it, it's no longer theirs.
Yeah, there's only so much attention that's given to each minority.
Yeah.
So if one person's not even from that minority and they've got a big platform and they're spouting off about that minority, it doesn't leave room for that minority to answer back.
Who's already struggling as it is to find work.
It's too bad we can't use a royalty system. Like if somebody puts on blackface, that they have to pay a black community a certain royalty to.
Diana wants in.
Yeah, we're also talking as if the only time people write about someone from another background or another culture, they're doing an entire book where they're trying to represent that culture. What about the fact that we all live in a heterogeneous world? I don't even know if I said that right. But for example, I live in a large family. It's an extended family. It's multiracial. It's multi-faith. So when I'm writing a book is going to contain all those people in it. If I'm writing about Trinidad, which is the book I'm working on at the moment, yes, my father is white West Indian, but you can't write a book about Trinidad without writing about race. There are going to be characters in that book who are not white. There's just no other way to do it. What about that? Like, that's not the same thing. It seems to me that we're talking as if the only way to do this, or the only way it's being done, is this part and parcel, almost theft, I guess, is the way that it's being discussed. But most of us are more than the sum of our parts. We're more than what we look like, or more than what we may seem to know. And we have a broader perspective and a broader place in the world. What about that?
Well, because Andrew's talking about we're trying to tell people what they can and can't write.
Right.
We're not trying to do that. And for years, I mean, look at all the Warner Brothers cartoons that showed other cultures in the most horrendous way, and you think that the market knew that what they were saying and what they were doing was horribly wrong. Portraying other cultures, portraying Muslim culture, other African cultures as a bunch of barbarians. They're not going to get called upon it unless there are ethnic minorities there who will call them upon it.
True.
And who are heard.
True.
Okay,
Yeah.
because for how long it was being done and we weren't being heard. So I don't think the market can be trusted to just regulate itself.
Let's try this. Can I put another example on the table here? This is from, Shelton, let's bring this graphic up. This is from the Boston Museum of Fine Art. They invited people to try on a replica of the kimono from a Monet painting, And the replica was commissioned by the Japanese public broadcaster, and the same exhibit ran in 3 Japanese cities. And there's a tweet that says, "Channel your inner Camille Monet and try on a replica of the kimono she's wearing in La Japonaise on Wednesday nights." I want to know, and that's obviously a white woman in that shot doing that. I want to know.
In the painting too, right?
In the painting too. So do we have a problem with this? Who wants to jump in on this?
No.
You don't have a problem with that?
It's clothing.
No? Okay, it's clothing.
I think it's tricky. I think it depends on who's looking at it. I think it can go either way, and I can understand why it would go either way. But you are looking at a white woman, and the representation of the painting is sometimes assumed to be a commentary on cultural appropriation, which is interesting. I think my problem with this painting is that there was no acknowledgement of why she's wearing that clothing or what the clothing means or what it represents to that culture. So in that case, I do understand it, and then it's a little tricky. You have people coming in, trying it on for fun as if it's just a costume, but it's not just a costume. It means a lot more than that to that culture.
Shane, more going on there than the people who put this campaign together appreciated?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on who's involved. Were these people invited into this exercise to bring some type of, I don't know, acknowledgement or some type of, was it a learning experience for them? I don't know enough about this particular painting. I do know that in our culture, and it's so funny because I take part in cultural fairs out here in BC, and, you know, even some of our own people, which I found a little bit shocking, you know, we're taking, you know, headdresses from back east. And definitely this is huge in the non-Indigenous world. I mean, this, from what I gather, this is a very sacred item, you know, that you have to earn. It's like putting on the Pope's frock, you know. So it's a very charged issue in my culture. And again, if it was brought by the Japanese culture, you know, to sort of try it on, I can't honestly say that you know, I see anything major wrong with it, and do the issues get so complex that we can't kind of let ourselves go into that realm?
I think it's a missed opportunity, actually. Sorry, Shane.
In what respect?
Well, because it was actually a moment in French culture when Japonisme was very popular, when, you know, putting on Japanese clothing, Japanese decorating, Japanese fine arts was something people were kind of obsessed by. And so it would have been actually a moment to talk about Orientalism at that time, and, you know, how it's reflected today.
But apparently there was a bit of a firestorm of reaction to it, and they pulled the campaign and the exhibit.
Which is too bad, because I think they could have extended the conversation, and it could have been actually entertaining. Like, you know, the painting itself is a bit ironic, so.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, when we look at other cultures.
Sorry, we're gonna have Roxana first, and then Andrew, you come in after that.
Yeah, when we look at other cultures, we can actually be admiring other cultures. I've always been a fan of Indigenous culture. I always, when growing up, I always wished I was Native because that was so cool. And I think when it depends on the whole respect issue. If it's done with respect, when it comes to clothing, I think that that's clothing, and clothing. It's like what Andrew was saying. We can't really stop people from dressing and expressing themselves the way they want. I'm going to go to a conference and I'm going to take hijabs so that people can actually put it on and see what it's just a piece of cloth. Okay, it doesn't make me any different. It's just I'm covering myself. So to me, it's not an issue, but I can understand, like Sadaf said, where it would be an issue to other cultures.
Andrew.
Well, we've reached a level. I mean, this is we've gone into an interesting place in this conversation. We have moved from literature, now we're in dress. I imagine we could talk about food, dance, other elements of culture. As in so many debates, these things become highly sensitive. I'm Jewish. Steve, you'll know we come from a culture of the bagel, for example. When I began in life, there were light bagels and dark bagels, and Jews claimed the bagel as part of their cuisine or their food. Well, today there are no longer just light and dark bagels. There are multi-grain, and there are flax, and there's a bagel called the all-dressed bagel, and the bagel that you might see at the Holiday Inn buffet on a Saturday morning is nothing like the bagel I used to know. Does that mean that bagel has been appropriated in a way that I would find offensive? No, I'm actually flattered that more people are eating the bagel and enjoying it, although not what I had. But I know that sounds absurd in the level, but this is the social justice warriors that are that have been mobilized on this question are going after that type of thing. So we can sit here and have a reasonable conversation about people trying on a kimono, which of course reflects, as I think Diana was saying, the rage for Orientalism and at that time in Paris, which was something historically interesting. And we can have that conversation, or we can have other conversations. And as Roxana said, I do think we linger on these conversations while other larger, more important things happen in our world. And I think that's the danger in this conversation.
Sadaf, what's wrong with sharing the bagel to other communities and cultures around the world?
What's wrong with sharing the bagel? I mean, I think it really depends. I do think there's a fine line, and I think when do you decide it's inspiration and appropriation, and when do you feel flattered by it? Because I certainly have felt that before, and I think it really depends. If you look at music videos, for example, there are some that actually make me feel better, and I feel like, for example, the Coldplay video with Beyonce, I think it was
We got that. Can we play 10 seconds of that, just so people who, I know everybody knows who Beyonce is, but they may not have seen the video in question. Can we do that, Sheldon?
Yeah, sure.
Let's do that. Let's play just a few seconds of this. Okay, that's beautiful, that's spectacular, but she's not from India.
No, she's not. And I think this video actually came under fire for cultural appropriation quite a bit. But I also saw it and I thought, this is actually, I feel good watching this. And I think it's hard to decide when you feel bad and when you don't, and other people feel differently. However, with this, they filmed it in India. They used locals as dancers, and locals were even working on the crew.
Does she get a pass on this? Because I'm going to, very blunt question here. Does she get a pass because she's black and not white?
I think so.
I think sometimes it does seem,
Some people said
Yeah.
that she did.
I think that can definitely be the case. Even though you can have appropriation between minority cultures, I do think sometimes people who are of color do get an easier pass.
Well, they're not the dominant color. It's not
Exactly.
it's not an oppressive issue. It's more like an
Exactly.
intercultural issue.
Yeah. And this is coming from another culture that's been exploited as well. So
Yeah.
there feels like there's an understanding there. And I mean, this video also uses children, and they're kind of the focus of the video. It's really beautiful, and the dancing, and they've got Sonam Kapoor in it as well. And I mean, they also feature the Holi Festival, which is really beautiful. And there's something about it that just feels flattering to me, and it feels like, okay, we're accepting this culture and we're bringing it onto this wider platform.
Can you see why, if a white artist had done the same thing,
Yeah.
they would consider this to be the height of hypocrisy?
Oh yeah,
Well,
for
because
sure.
they're profiting off of Indian culture.
Exactly, yeah.
But
isn't
Beyonce
Beyonce
is doing
Well,
it as
she
well.
should pay a royalty.
I'm not completely excusing it, but I think what I'm just saying is that there is a fine line, and I think it really comes down to individual taste sometimes. And in this case, it felt appreciated, and I felt appreciated, and I watched it, and it felt beautiful to me.
Yeah, but then we're not Hindu, and a lot of it was
Exactly.
Hindu
Yeah.
imagery. So
And
I'm
the
not
same
sure
thing-
how, and a lot of it was religious Hindu imagery.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how I would feel.
Isn't that the same thing as Andrew was saying before, though? That if it's done with empathy and it's done sensitively, then
No, but the
who's
royalty
to
issue,
worry?
they're not paying for it.
No, I understand
Not
that.
paying for it. But yeah, that seemed to be empathetically done, paying off, considerable respect to
Yeah.
the
I
culture
do think there's a
being
value to
depicted.
that, yeah. And having researched it and worked with people who are in that culture and involved in it, it makes a difference.
You know what? As often is the case on this program, just when we really get going, time's up. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Shane Jackson, good of you to join us in North Vancouver, British Columbia. Andrew Cohen in Washington, D.C. Diana Fitzgerald-Bryden, Sadaf Hassan, Roxana Khan. You're going to be at the International Festival of Authors.
on Thursday.
On Thursday.
Yeah,
Talking
we're doing
about what?
Righting wrongs, about injustice, talking about injustice.
Oh, there's a non-controversial little topic. There we
It's
go.
gonna be fiery.
You're right off to the races. Good discussion, everybody. Thanks so much for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.